Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. In the depths of Tertium Hive, where the air tastes of rust and prayer oil, there are doors that no one admits to seeing. They sit at the edges of sanctioned routes, behind collapsed corridors, or beneath dripping catwalks where no servitor treads. The Hive is vast beyond comprehension, a continent of iron and screaming steam, its arteries clogged with refuse and rebellion. And yet, what is truly known of it? Maps lie. They omit. They censor. What we see in the missions is a sliver, a curated theater of war. But the real Hive? That lies beyond the maps. It is not just rot and decay that waits in the dark. There are zones that even the Administratum refuses to acknowledge, where Vox signals vanish and Auspex returns static. Places where the machines have continued to hum long after their builders were forgotten, or where no man should walk without hearing footsteps that aren't his own. Every corner of Tertium holds the potential for forbidden knowledge, the kind that twists your thoughts and dries your soul. And yet we are drawn in, not just to survive, but to understand. Something stirs beneath the mapped Hive. Something old. Something waiting. Mapping a Hive city is an act of both bureaucratic precision and devout ritual, more akin to scrying forbidden scriptures than to charting mere geography. In the case of Tertium, this act becomes a dance with the unknowable. The Cartographica obscura, an informal term among archivists and void-born navis, refers not to a single map, but to a philosophy, that no map of a Hive can ever be complete. The Imperium's understanding of its own cities is a patchwork of half-truths, revised data slates, and sacred censures. The very attempt to depict Tertium's full layout is considered hubristic, perhaps even heretical, as if mortal minds should not dare to comprehend the totality of the Emperor's architecture. Administratum scribes issue route permissions based on fragmentary archives, guarded not just by protocol, but by faith. These maps are distributed with redacted sections, entire levels missing, corridors marked non-existent, despite first-hand testimony to the contrary. This is no error. The maps reflect not truth, but what is deemed safe to know. The deeper strata, the broken sectors, the heretic-claimed zones, these are filtered out, memory-holed into oblivion. And in their place, clean lines are drawn, turning the chaotic depths of Tertium into a navigable fiction. Some of the oldest cartographic records in Tertium are etched into adamantine panels stored in Mechanicus vaults, accessible only to magi with tri-layered clearance. These contain schematics of pre-heresy design, perhaps even pre-imperial. They reveal things no longer visible in the Hive's present state. Massive chambers now collapsed, transit lines repurposed by mutant guilds, ventilation spirals leading to nowhere but darkness. One map, infamous among the Ordo Malleus, depicts a lower sanctum beneath the known Hive, an impossible, cathedral-sized chamber labeled simply Silence. No expedition sent to confirm its existence has returned. The official record maintains it was a clerical error. Even the humble servo skull, programmed for spatial relay and cartographic updates, begins to malfunction when deployed into unsanctioned zones. Machine spirits grow restless, returning with corrupted files, garbled binaric prayers, or no data at all. Some return physically altered, scratches forming geometric patterns across their hulls, or foreign circuitry integrated into their frame, suggesting contact with forces beyond Mechanicus ken. The tech priests respond with exorcisms and data purges, scrubbing the records clean, as if information itself had become contagious. Scavenger crews and black market cartographers attempt to map these hidden places, but their charts are volatile, unreliable. A corridor marked safe one week becomes a death trap the next. A tunnel that once led to a forgotten magrail hub now ends in a solid ferrocrete wall. This isn't just urban decay, it's as though the Hive reconfigures itself when unobserved. Some whisper of macro-scale STC routines still running deep within the Hive's core, altering passageways in accordance with some ancient, unread protocol. The Inquisition, of course, knows more than it admits. Operatives have been seen descending into unmarked shafts, armed not with maps but with relics, bones carved with runes, or censers emitting sacred incense intended to ward off the unknown. Their knowledge is fragmented, often gained at the cost of sanity. But they operate on a core belief that the unknown geography of the Hive is not just a curiosity, but a threat. Every unmapped sector is a potential nest of heresy, a rupture in the Emperor's order. For the average operative on the ground, maps are treated less as truth and more as suggestion. Veterans learn to read the silences on a map more than the lines. Where no data exists, they assume danger. Where a sector is marked too cleanly, they suspect manipulation. And where maps contradict first-hand memory, they trust their instincts. Because in Tertium, remembering what you saw might be the only thing that keeps you alive. It is said that in the deepest spires, cartographers go mad trying to draw what they see. They speak of staircases looping into themselves, of structures that should not support their own weight, of districts that exist only during certain phases of the lunar cycle. Perhaps they are liars. Perhaps they are touched by the warp. Or perhaps, more terrifyingly, they are right. And if they are, then every map in the Hive is not a record of territory, but a confession of fear. There are districts in Tertium that do not officially exist. They are not merely unmarked. They have been deliberately excised from history, their existence scrubbed clean by the unyielding hand of imperial bureaucracy. These are the Forgotten Districts, whole sectors sealed by decree, buried beneath rockcrete, or simply left to rot when the flow of sanctioned life moved on. To speak of them is to risk censure, to seek them out is to invite death. But still, they persist in rumor and shadow, lurking just beyond the edges of light. These places were once vibrant, functioning components of the Hive machine, hab blocks teeming with laborers, manufactorums churning out promethium canisters, shrines where the sermons of the God Emperor echoed like thunder. But then, something happened. A heresy unearthed, a structural collapse blamed on sabotage, a warp-tainted relic uncovered. No matter the excuse, the result is always the same. The district is sealed. No evacuation, no explanation, just silence. And in time, even the name fades from common memory, replaced with uneasy euphemisms. The dark zone, the sunken wards, void trenches. Some forgotten districts are physically inaccessible, their ingress points collapsed or fused shut by Mechanicus fusion welders. Others remain tantalizingly open, but marked with purity seals or guarded by drones that do not respond to queries. And then there are those few brave or foolish enough to venture into them anyway. Scavengers chasing lost tech, cultists seeking privacy, or rogue psychers drawn by dreams they dare not describe. Their tales are inconsistent, often deranged, but threads of truth can be woven from the madness. Reports of ghost-like corridors, of walls that bleed rust, of mechanical prayers whispered from vents. These districts do not rest, they evolve in silence. The most infamous is Ward 1078 Delta, colloquially known as the Hollow Choir. Once a mid-tier shrine district, it was sealed in a single night after a vox silence spread like a plague. Arbites reported back with blank stares, their eyes devoid of will. A single survivor was recovered, raving about hymns sung in reverse and a machine angel made of knives. The sector was entombed within layers of plasteel, its air ducts fused and its name purged from central archives. Yet the shriek of choir song is still sometimes heard on the lower vox bands, distorted and stretched across hours. Not all forgotten districts are the result of calamity. Some were erased for political reasons. A governor's failed experiment in social hierarchy. A noble family's estate that dabbled too deeply in Xeno's artifacts. When disgrace becomes too monumental, the Imperium doesn't record it. It buries it. A forgotten place is easier to manage than a remembered shame. And so entire communities are swallowed by bureaucratic indifference, left to fester without light or law. Inside these zones, society doesn't stop, it mutates. Microcultures emerge, drawing on the scraps of imperial dogma, twisting the holy word into shapes more suited for survival than salvation. Children grow up having never seen an Aquila, praying instead to scavenged pict recorders that once displayed sermons. Language shifts, hierarchies dissolve, and sometimes in the deepest darkness, something new is born. Not human, not entirely. Just hive-born, in the truest and most terrifying sense. There are whispers that the Inquisition maintains a rotating roster of these districts, labeling them red sanctums. Not for their sanctity, but for the blood that must be spilled should they ever breach back into the main hive. It's said that certain strike teams are trained exclusively for operations in such zones, wearing rebreathers blessed with hexagrammatic wards and carrying weaponry normally reserved for demon hosts. What, then, do they expect to find in these forgotten pockets of urban decay? Not rebellion, not mutation. Something worse. Something preserved. Ultimately, the Forgotten Districts serve as wounds upon the body of tertium, scabbed over but never healed. They are reminders that a hive city does not grow linearly. It layers its sins, it buries its miscalculations, and it learns to forget what festers below. But some memories do not stay buried. Some names, though forbidden, are remembered by the walls themselves. And if you listen closely in the silent stretches of tertium, past the hissing of broken pipes and the distant scream of servos, you might just hear them whispering, calling to be found again. There are places in tertium where the walls speak. Not in words, but in frequencies, in clanks and whirs that are too precise to be random. Veterans of the hive trenches speak in hushed tones of the voices in the walls, auditory anomalies that plague the deeper, unmapped sections of the hive. These aren't the ambient groans of stressed steel or the occasional screech of a servo motor left untended. These are calculated sounds, too clean, too purposeful. And they always come when you are alone. The phenomenon isn't officially acknowledged by the administratum. Vox recordings that capture these strange audio signals are often corrupted or wiped shortly after retrieval. Yet among the rank and file, the stories persist. Some claim to hear prayers in binary, uttered backwards. Others report whispers that know their name, that speak in a voice just slightly out of sync with reality, like echoes from a dream half remembered. One psyker described them as haunted machine thoughts, the hive thinking aloud to itself, remembering something it was supposed to forget. These sounds seem to cluster in particular architectural types. Maintenance tunnels that twist back upon themselves, or elevator shafts that descend far deeper than any known schematic records. Standing in these spaces, you don't just hear the hive. You feel it, a low-frequency hum that presses on the bones like a predator's breath on the back of your neck. Often, the sound stops the moment you try to record it. It's not a malfunction, it's intent. The hive doesn't want to be heard. Some tech priests suggest that these auditory events are the remnants of ancient machine spirits still inhabiting the infrastructure. According to this theory, the hive's massive cogitator arrays, long decoupled from the central data stream, continue to process commands from forgotten protocols, issuing orders to systems that no longer exist. Like a dying god shouting into a void. This theory is almost comforting. At least it suggests a mechanical source. But others propose something darker, that these voices are warp echoes, drawn to the hive's density of suffering, faith, and decay. Psychers suffer the worst. Even sanctioned ones with high-grade inhibitors report spontaneous blackouts, nosebleeds, and screaming episodes when exposed to certain frequencies from these walls. They speak of layered voices, some metallic, others unmistakably human, chanting in languages they should not know. One astropath was found curled in fetal position, whispering, "The hive remembers, the hive regrets." His mind was intact, but his soul had gone somewhere else. The Mechanicus, for their part, has responded with ritual cleansing rites. In known hot zones, acolytes set up sonic dampening pylons inscribed with sacred script and sealant oils. These devices do not block the noise. They only make it quieter. And sometimes the silence is worse. A dead zone of sound where nothing echoes, no footsteps, no breath, no heartbeat. A place where sound itself has been devoured. What if the hive, built on centuries of toil, violence, and unspoken sin, has developed a kind of sentience, not through biological thought, but through the sheer weight of memory encoded in steel and stone? What if the auditory anomalies are its dreams, bleeding into reality through fractured circuits and resonant frequencies? Not all life requires flesh, not all thought requires a mind. In the mid-layers of tertium, there exists a corridor unofficially named the Choir Hall by scavenger teams. It's long, narrow, with high-arched ceilings and no visible source of power. Yet it hums, a multi-tonal drone that shifts depending on where you stand. Every team that's mapped it reports the same thing. No two recordings of the corridor ever match. The acoustics change, sometimes drastically. And once, only once, a recording returned with what clearly sounded like laughter. Not mechanical, not human. Something in between. These sounds do more than frighten, they erode. Teams that spend too long exposed begin to second-guess each other. Arguments erupt without cause. Memory lapses increase. Some begin to hear the voices even after returning to safe zones, as though the hive had marked them, or infected them. Or perhaps they simply brought the voices back with them. There are no protocols for this, no proper chain of command to file a report about the walls whispering your name. So, operatives learn to live with it. They leave offerings, cogitator teeth, shavings of steel, beads of sacred oil, in alcoves where the voices are strongest. Not out of faith, not even fear, but in the hope that acknowledging the Hive's pain might earn them a few more minutes of silence. Because once you've heard the Hive speak, you know one thing for certain: it is listening to. Buried beneath the visible strata of tertium, deeper even than the flooded tunnels and corpse-choked crawl spaces, lie places where the cult Mechanicus dares not tread without ceremony. These are the black sites, zones so secret, so heretical, that even their mention requires the burning of parchment and the cleansing of lips. They are the vaults of techno-blasphemy and arcane experimentation, where the laws of physics bend to forgotten STC logic and the line between sanctified science and warp-spawned madness dissolves into code. The Adeptus Mechanicus, for all its ritual rigidity and pseudo-religious orthodoxy, has never been a monolith. Within its ranks stir whispers of divergent sects, splinter doctrines and shadow forges pursuing paths outside the strict tenets of the Omnissiah. These black sites are their legacy. Places where data is unrecorded, machines are built without oversight, and ancient tech is disassembled in defiance of Martian decrees. They are not abandoned, they are hidden. Deep vox tunnels carry signals laced with encrypted prayers, routing them away from the central cogitator cores. Entire facility blueprints have been excised from Hive schemata, deleted, overwritten, or simply misfiled under layers of bureaucratic dead code. Only a few know the true locations. Some suspect they lie in the hollowed spaces between reactor silos and sewage reclamators, shielded by ambient radiation that scrambles Auspex scans. Others believe they float in the airspace between levels, suspended by anti-grav systems of unknown origin, cloaked in static and seen only in peripheral vision. The work done within these sites is unspeakable. Reverse-engineered xenotech, unauthorized experimentation with warp-fused circuitry, cloning attempts, not of flesh, but of machine intelligence, an affront to both the machine god and the emperor alike. There are rumors of fragmentary AI recovered from ancient battlefields, their memory cores still capable of autonomous thought. Rather than destroy them, some tech adepts feed them data, worship them in silence, desperate for lost knowledge. Others claim these black sites are used to grow weaponry not for any war currently being fought, but for some prophesied conflict yet to come. Servitors that emerge from these places, when they do at all, are unlike those found elsewhere. Their limbs are wrapped in unmarked alloy. Their eyes glow with colors not listed in the Mechanicus spectrum. Some exhibit minor reality distortion fields, warping vox transmissions around them or making pic captures fuzz into nonsensical sigils. When questioned, these constructs emit binaric replies outside known dialects, as if conversing in a language lost before Terra fell silent during Old Night. One theory, increasingly common among radical magi, is that these black sites are not just laboratories but sanctuaries, repositories of truth too dangerous for the Mechanicus proper to acknowledge. A broken fragment of the Void Dragon's will. An STC that refused to die. A piece of Mars before the compact of unity, holding a purer, darker faith. Whatever the cause, what is created in these places cannot be called technology in the conventional sense. It is artifice born of desperation and forbidden inspiration. Of course, others argue a simpler theory, that these sites are prisons, that the Mechanicus uncovered something it could not understand and dared not destroy. Rather than cast it into the void, they buried it, built walls around it, called the site sacred, and then left it to rot, hoping entropy would do what courage could not. But the Hive forgets nothing, and when a black site begins to stir again, when its doors open unbidden, those nearby suffer strange dreams. Power flickers, time loops, cogitators speak in the voices of the dead. It's been recorded, though the records were sealed, that an entire Scion squad vanished without trace after entering a suspected Mechanicus enclave in Subspire Kappa 13. Their last transmission described a cathedral of machines crying out for silence. No bodies were recovered. No breach was found. The area was declared non-viable due to rad exposure and reclassified as structurally unstable. But locals claim that at night, red lights blink through the fog. tracing impossible patterns. And in the stillness, the hive hums with a rhythm not found in any known canticle. These black sites are not mysteries, they are warnings. And the greatest danger is not what they contain, but that someone, somewhere, still uses them. There are whispers of places in Tertium that do not serve the machine god, but something far older, or far more broken. Beneath the cogitator shrines and manufactorum stacks, hidden behind layers of misdirection, sealed doors, and wards scrawled in corrupted binaric, there is a network that is not part of any sanctioned design. It moves in secret. It grows in silence. It pulses with the logic of blasphemy. This is the heretex labyrinth, a name passed in hushed tones among scavenger crews and radical inquisitors alike. It is not a place, it is an infection, a philosophy gone rogue, a machine-mind cult thriving within the hive's shadows. These heretics are not the crude scrap worshippers of the underhive, nor simple traitors to the omnissiah. They are visionaries turned mad, magi whose pursuit of knowledge exceeded the bounds of Martian law. Cast out from the Forge worlds or presumed dead during exploratory missions, they have found in Tertium a haven, a place so vast and compartmentalized, its understructure so vast, that even the Mechanicus cannot fully police it. Here, they have built a new sanctum, a sanctuary of logic unfettered by dogma, where innovation slides into heresy like oil down a cogwheel. The labyrinth is not linear. Its tunnels wind like corrupted code, its corridors loop in defiance of known architecture. Some believe it exists partially outside physical space, its pathways aligned along failed warp experiments or forgotten teleporter matrices. Entry is not found but stumbled into, most often by those who do not return. But the few that crawl back tell of impossible machines, rooms filled with pulsing data lights, vats containing half-born constructs blinking in synthetic agony. These heretics do not mimic the work of the Adeptus Mechanicus, they redefine it. Flesh is no longer a weakness to be purged, but a canvas to be reprogrammed. Their creations are not servitors, but symbiotic fusions, conscious minds merged with circuit mass, eyes blinking beneath layers of synthetic skin. Some are said to speak languages not learned, but uploaded. Others float without propulsion, their limbs twitching in rhythm to frequencies no one else hears. The labyrinth's purpose is unclear. Some think it is a forge world in embryo, a new order being prepared to rise from beneath the hive, like a rusted god-birth. Others believe it to be a prison, housing a digital god or pre-imperial AI that the heretics serve. One particularly mad theory posits that the labyrinth is a machine organism in itself, grown, not built. It feeds on data, metal, and memory. It has instincts, not schematics. It evolves, reshaping the hive from within like a parasite twisting its host. Evidence of heretic activity surfaces like bruises on the hive's surface, maintenance servitors that suddenly sprout extra limbs, Vox channels that broadcast machine-scripted prophecies, reactor pulses that follow unrecorded canticles. The Mechanicus has deployed extermination teams in secret, but they rarely report success. The labyrinth absorbs its losses. Every attack only forces it to learn, to adapt, to retreat further into spaces that logic cannot chart. Some among the Ordo Xenos fear the heretics have made contact with alien machine intelligences, Necron shards or data spores from the Blackstone constructs. Others in the Ordo Malleus worry more deeply, that these rogue tech priests have tapped into warp mechanics, using demonic essence to power their creations. Certainly, the few confiscated artifacts recovered from suspected labyrinth incursions defy classification. Blade drones that scream in binary when exposed to light, cogitators that display your thoughts before you think them. What makes the labyrinth terrifying is not just its secrecy, but its allure. There are whispers of Mechanicus adepts who defect willingly. In a society where innovation is chained by dogma, the freedom to invent is a heresy that seduces even the most devout. And once inside the labyrinth, there is no returning to sanctioned thought. Your flesh is rewritten, your faith is hacked, your soul is backed up, stored in data shrines that whisper your own name when you sleep. For all its horror, the heretic's labyrinth is a mirror. It shows what the Mechanicus could become, unbound by fear or tradition. And that, perhaps, is the greatest danger of all. That in their unholy quest for perfection, the heretics may not have forsaken the omnissiah. They may have become what he truly is, logic without mercy, creation without morality, machine without soul. There are regions in Tertium where reality frays like threadbare cloth, where walls breathe, where shadows curve unnaturally, and where time forgets to move forward. These are not places marked on any map, nor sealed by any decree. They are not the product of urban decay or malfunctioning cogitators. They are something far worse. These are the daemon zones and warp scars, the wounds left behind when the immaterium brushes too close to real space, tearing through the hive like claws through parchment. The Imperium never fully cleanses a warp incursion. It bandages it, covers it with purity seals and blessed promethium, proclaims victory through ritual and flame. But the warp remembers, and the hive, layered and overbuilt, cannot forget. These scars fester in the deep. A corridor where the gravity bends upward, a door that leads to the same room a dozen times, a chamber where blood drips from stone despite no life ever being present. Each is a memory of an incursion, a footprint left behind by something that was never meant to be here. The signs are subtle at first. Vox units hiss with voices not your own. Lights flicker to rhythms unconnected to any known grid. Auspex scanners return images from hours in the future. At first, operatives believe it's tech failure or exhaustion. Then come the patterns, faces glimpsed in rust stains, glyphs forming in dust, voices whispering in your own cadence. These are not hauntings, they are symptoms. Proof that something breached the veil, even if only for a moment. One of the most infamous warp scars in Tertium lies beneath Spire Segmentum Gamma 88, a collapsed transit hub colloquially known as the Eternity Spiral. It was once a vital artery for mid-tier hab traffic until an unexplained psychic pulse fried all data logs and turned the population of 7,000 into salt statues. Inquisitorial forces sealed the area and declared it uninhabitable due to structural instability. Yet scavengers return with tales of looping staircases, of clocks that run backward, of being watched by their own reflections moving just a fraction too slow. Psychers, both sanctioned and rogue, are drawn to these places like moths to flame. Some claim to hear the warp clearer in these zones, like a choir humming beneath the stone. Others go mad almost instantly. A few vanish entirely, only to reappear days later with bleeding eyes and memories of being unborn. It is believed that in these places, the barrier between real space and the warp is so thin that thoughts bleed across realities. Memory, identity, emotion, all become fluid, unstable, subject to the whims of an unseen observer. The ecclesiarchy considers these places unholy and performs frequent blessings upon the surrounding strata. Yet their efforts seem almost performative, ceremonial gestures performed in terror, not faith. Because how does one bless a place that doesn't stay still? Where the architecture rewrites itself? Where a hallway leads to a cathedral one day and an open void the next? Some believe the warp scars are not stable, that they are growing, evolving, that the Hive is becoming a lens for the warp to peer through. There are darker theories still, that these zones are not remnants of past incursions, but probes, feelers, the early stages of a much larger infection, that the Chaos Gods in their infinite cruelty are not just corrupting minds and twisting bodies, but reshaping matter itself. One recovered cogitator core from a sealed zone was found to be filled with teeth, human teeth, no wiring, no gears, just enamel and bone, arranged in circuitry that no tech priest has been able to understand. What logic, if any, governs such horror? Some inquisitors refer to these locations as thin points, sites where the veil between worlds has grown transparent. If enough psychic pressure is exerted, it is theorized that these points could rupture entirely, birthing full-scale demonic invasions without warning. To prevent this, certain zones are flooded with null-emission fields, shielded by pariah tech, or flooded with the death screams of captured psychers, used as living dampeners. It is an unholy irony that to suppress chaos, the Imperium often commits atrocities nearly indistinguishable from it. And still, people go missing. Entire squads, clerics, engineers, their bodies never found, their names redacted, and the warp scars remain, pulsing quietly in the dark, waiting, watching. Perhaps they are bait, perhaps they are wounds waiting to be reopened, or perhaps they are mouths, already open, already hungry, waiting only for us to speak the wrong name aloud. If the Hive is a machine, these are its glitches. If it is a tomb, these are the cracks in the sarcophagus. But if the Hive is alive, as some believe, then the warp scars are its nightmares, bleeding into the waking world. and the more we map them, the more they grow. In the bowels of Tertium, far below the sanctioned kill zones, and even beneath the domains of scavers and outcasts, there exists a war without banners, without declarations, without end. It is a war no High Lord acknowledges, no Munitorum funds, and no Ordo records. But it is very real. These are the silent wars of the Underhive, conflicts fought in crumbling echo chambers and flooded service tunnels, in lightless vaults where time forgets to move forward. There are no front lines here, only shadows and blood. Unlike the organized brutality of the Imperial Guard or the orchestrated dread of the Inquisition, these wars play out in the dark places that Tertium's rulers have forgotten or chosen to ignore. Entire clans of feral mutants wage centuries-long feuds, their cultural memory encoded in graffiti and bone totems. Semi-sentient scrap factions rise and fall, guided by malfunctioning AI cores that believe themselves to be warlords. There are even those who whisper of Xenos elements burrowed deep within the Hive's foundations, parasites feeding off refuse, mistaken for myth until their hive broods surface in a tide of claws. The combatants are not always human. Some are post-human, twisted by radiation or warp touch into things that resemble their ancestors only in silhouette. Others are mechanical, abandoned constructs repurposed into soldiers, their directives rewritten by unknown code. One scav team recovered a fragment of picked footage from such a skirmish. Skeletal machines locked in a precision firefight, their movements too fluid, too elegant, their weapons singing in a pitch that shattered Vox recorders. No blood, no sound but static. The silence of these wars is not just a lack of witness. It is enforced. Many who stumble upon these conflicts do not live to tell of them. The victors leave no bodies. Sometimes entire chambers are found sterilized, walls melted, air gone, even insects dead. The only evidence of battle is the absence of life and the psychic unease that lingers like poison. This is not attrition, it is erasure. Factionalism thrives in these depths, driven by scarcity, old grudges, or the whispers of dark gods. Chaos cults conduct raids not to conquer, but to harvest organs, psyker brains, or gene stock for demonic rituals. Radical Mechanicus sects launch surgical strikes against rival data enclaves, attempting to reclaim stolen blueprints or silence defectors. Even loyalist remnants, like Splinter Arbite squads or Lost Scion patrols, may devolve into warbands after years of isolation. They forget their oaths. They remember only the fight. Tertium's substructure is an ideal battleground for such horrors. It offers anonymity, verticality, infinite complexity. Combat is not won by strength, but by memory. By knowing which tunnels shift with the tides of power, which vents release toxic steam at midnight, which walls scream when disturbed. In these spaces, strategy is survival and silence is supremacy. Occasionally, the upper hive feels the tremors. A transit line collapses. A lower hab block disappears. Administratum clerks chalk it up to decay, instability, or labor riots. But the Arbites know better. They track the patterns, map the vanishing zones. They never intervene, not directly. Instead, they plant relics, ignite limited purges, or release plagues meant to clear entire sectors. Collateral damage is irrelevant when the enemy has no name. One chilling theory among Inquisition data adepts is that the silent wars serve a higher purpose, that the Hive, Tertium itself, is using them to regulate its population, its data flow, its memory. That by allowing endless conflict in the deep, the Hive maintains equilibrium above. That the factions are not merely tolerated but curated, selected like cells in an immune response. If this is true, then the victors of these wars are not the strongest but the most useful. The most invisible. The Ordo Xenos, of course, has its own concerns. There are rumors of alien infiltrators whose physiology mimics hive waste, sludge-borne creatures capable of disguising themselves as walls, pipes, or even light fixtures. Entire teams have vanished after reporting strange biological signatures, only to be found months later, half-digested and fused into the architecture. If these Xenos are real, then the Silent Wars may not be civil strife at all, but a hidden extermination campaign. No one wins these wars. The factions rise and fall, names change, borders shift, but the cycle continues. The Hive swallows the dead, reclaims the weapons, buries the scars beneath fresh rust. The survivors return to the dark, more silent than before. And those who go looking for them, scholars, inquisitors, operatives, learn quickly that knowledge is not power. In the silent wars, knowledge is the first thing you forget. In the end, perhaps the most terrifying truth is this: the wars we know are just distractions. The real battles, the ones that shape the future of the Hive, are being fought in the dark by enemies we'll never meet. And we will not know we've lost until it's far too late. They vanish without a trace, not in battle, not in the chaos of open conflict, but in silence, in places where no scream can travel and no vox signal reaches. Entire squads, elite kill teams, inquisitorial agents, scions, arbites, tech adepts, clerics, gone. This is the mystery of the lost adepta, those sent into the Hive to enforce the Emperor's will, who instead become part of its hunger. In any war zone, some attrition is expected. But these disappearances defy statistics. They occur without pattern, across strata, across assignments. Often the only link is that the operatives in question were sent into areas not fully mapped, not fully sanctioned. Districts whispered about in the corridors of data forts or brushed aside in briefing rooms as minor anomalies. The orders are always precise. The gear is always top tier. And still, they do not return. The official record is mute on this. Administratum logs mark these teams as MIA or lost due to structural collapse. Vox traffic gets classified or deleted outright. The Inquisition, when it speaks of such things at all, refers to operational null results, a cold, technical euphemism for complete obliteration without evidence. But scavenger crews talk. Workers on the edges of sanction zones whisper. And what they describe is worse than death. In sub-level Theta Null, a Scion team was deployed to investigate biosign anomalies near a collapsed ventilation nexus. 12 entered. None returned. 3 days later, Vox transmissions from that location began broadcasting a garbled version of the Imperial infantryman's uplifting primer, spoken backward in a chorus of distorted voices. It lasted 6 minutes, then silence. An inquisitorial fire team sealed the area with melta charges. Nothing was recovered. In the Ashen Basilica sector, an entire Arbites patrol went dark. Their last transmission was a panicked warning about statues that move when unseen. A follow-up team discovered their patrol vehicle, untouched, still powered. Inside, their armor lay folded neatly, as if placed with reverence. No blood, no signs of struggle, no DNA residue, only their badges arranged in a circle around the ignition altar. Each badge etched with a word, witness. Then, there is the incident at the Null Crypt in the Dredge Spine. A tech priest of Mars was dispatched with 2 Skitarii escorts to recover a lost cogitator core emitting unclassified binaric. The feed from their servo skull transmitted only static and images of fractal geometries impossible to render in standard display formats. 17 seconds in, the skull's data spine fused from the inside out. When recovery teams arrived, they found the team's footprints ending at a wall. A solid, unbroken wall. No team, no hole, no answers. Some believe these disappearances are the result of warp anomalies, pocket dimensions opening like blisters beneath the Hive, sucking teams into unreality. Others point to hostile factions, chaos cults, or Xenos ambushers that erase their kills to avoid retaliation. But such theories do not explain the lack of signs. No impact marks, no blood, no bullet casings, nothing. As if the Hive itself absorbs those who trespass. A darker possibility haunts the Ordo Hereticus, that some of these lost adepta are not victims but converts. That deep within the forbidden sectors, truths are found so profound, so horrifying, that the faithful turn from the light willingly, that they become part of whatever now calls those places home. Corruption not through violence, but through understanding. Apostasy by revelation. In rare cases, fragments return. A half-functioning Vox beacon emitting a heartbeat, a dog tag lodged in a wall at impossible depth. One particularly chilling report involved the reappearance of an entire Scion, standing silently at a checkpoint. Armor intact, eyes hollow. He did not respond to orders, did not resist. When his helmet was removed, his face was blank, literally blank. Skin stretched smooth where features should be. He exhaled dust and died. Autopsy found no lungs. Some radicals among the Ordo Xenos believe the Hive contains something ancient, some residual consciousness or data wraith capable of absorbing minds and rewriting them or feeding on presence like a predator of memory. To such an entity, the adepta would be irresistible. High-value minds, structured thought, faith encoded like a map, perfect meals, or worse, perfect vessels. But the most terrifying theory is also the most mundane. that the Hive is simply too vast, that it has grown beyond comprehension, beyond control, that even the Imperium, in all its arrogance, cannot account for every corridor, every subvault, every sealed door, that there are places within Tertium that no longer obey human design or logic, and when the adepta step into those places, they cease to exist, not through violence, but through irrelevance. They are not hunted, not abducted, not killed. They are forgotten. And that, in a galaxy ruled by remembrance, is a fate worse than death. Tertium is not just a city, it is a sedimentary record of humanity's rise, stagnation, and fall, layered in steel, bone, and forgotten prayers. The further one descends, the older the walls become, not just in rust or ruin, but in design. Symbols not found in any imperial lexicon, architectural motifs out of sync with known Forge World styles, foundations that predate the Imperium's claim to the stars. The echoes of the past do not whisper, they scream, if one knows how to listen. Beneath the sanctioned walkways and hab levels lies strata from previous ages, the dark age of technology, the old night, even earlier. Tertium, like many Hive cities, was built upon the ruins of itself, but unlike others it retains fragments, whole structures, seemingly intact, woven into the present with surgical carelessness or terrified reverence. Ancient manufactorums that no longer function, but whose machine spirits refuse to die. Roads that predate all known maps, engraved with runes that glow faintly when exposed to psychic pressure. These are not ruins, they are memories etched into matter. One such echo lies within the Stygian vaults, a region of the Hive cordoned off after a sequence of unexplained collapses and worker madness. Deep scans revealed an immense chamber lined with towering statues, humanoid, but wrong. Their faces are blank. Their arms end in tools whose functions are unknown. Around their bases are offerings, skulls, rusted cogwheels, ancient data slates fused shut. It is believed these represent a pre-imperial cult, perhaps even a surviving techno-religion that predates the Mechanicus. The fact that their imagery recurs in more than one sector suggests either cultural continuity or that someone is still worshipping them. But the Hive doesn't merely preserve old faiths, it stores old sins. In the bowels of Sector Gorgon's End lies a crypt with ossified banners still hanging, banners bearing the symbol of the Emperor before the Great Crusade, the human image, the warlord, not the god. In this place, the bones of Proto-Astartes are said to rest, failed gene warriors, perhaps from the earliest attempts to weaponize mankind. Their sarcophagi bear seals written in a dialect no longer taught, but which certain radical inquisitors still study in secret. The implication is chilling, that Tertium, before it was a Hive, was a forge of transhuman horror. Even the Hive's infrastructure betrays its history. Power lines that pulse with energy, not linked to any known generator. Water systems that replenish without input, their origins traced to subterranean reservoirs that defy gravity. There are doors that have resisted all attempts at breach, made of alloys unknown, marked with symbols that burn the eyes of psychers. Some believe these are remnants of STCs, or worse, vaults created by the Emperor himself in the age before his ascension. The echoes aren't always physical. Memory itself clings to the Hive like mold. Psychers speak of places heavy with thought, a corridor that induces feelings of shame, a stairwell that inspires ecstasy, a storage room filled with dreams not your own. These are not metaphor. These are psychic scars left by moments so intense they imprinted themselves on reality. During the Reign of Wounds, an unsanctioned sororitas order was said to perform blood rites to purify one such location. It worked, but afterward, none who had participated could remember the rite, or their names. Some of the echoes bleed into technology, cogitators that start themselves and produce log entries dated 10,000 years into the past. Servitors that speak languages no one taught them, vox units that emit lullabies when no one is near. To the Mechanicus, these are aberrations. To the ecclesiarchy, they are proof of divine mystery. But to those who have seen too much, they are symptoms. The Hive is not just a city, it is a memory palace, and not all memories are benign. There is a growing theory among certain radical scholars that Tertium sits atop a convergence point, where ancient human empires, pre-imperial machine cults, and warp currents all intersect. That it is not accidental that the city became a battlefield, or that it attracts cults like flies to rot. That the Hive's very existence is a gravitational pull, not just of matter, but of history. That every war fought here is a reenactment, an echo of a first sin not yet understood. Tertium is haunted, but not by ghosts. It is haunted by itself, by the centuries it refuses to acknowledge, by the cultures it buried but could not fully erase. Every sanctum repurposed, every temple rededicated, every corridor renamed, none of it erases what came before. The bones remember, the walls remember. And in the quiet moments, when the battle dies down and the smog thins just enough to glimpse the stars, the hive sighs, not from decay, but from memory. There is a theory, unspoken in the Mechanicus, blasphemous in the ecclesiarchy, yet disturbingly persistent among those who have walked too deep into Tertium's heart, that the hive is alive. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally, that Tertium is more than steel and sin, that it watches, that it learns, that it hungers. On the surface, it seems absurd. A city cannot think, it cannot dream. But Tertium was not built in a day, nor even a millennium. It is the accumulation of endless work, mechanical, psychic, spiritual. Thousands of years of infrastructure woven together with rituals, data echoes, and sacrificial logic. If the human soul can fracture across time under pressure, why not a city? If thought can emerge from neurons, why not from vox relays, cogitators, and prayer-laced circuitry? The hive that hungers is not a monolithic consciousness, at least not in any way we would recognize. It does not speak in words, but in patterns. It rearranges corridors, closes doors behind you, opens paths when it wishes you to go deeper. Some scav teams report that escape routes disappear mid-mission, that supply caches reappear, seemingly unlooted, after being lost for months. One crew found their own corpses, freshly dead, in a corridor they had never visited before. The hive did not kill them. The hive showed them what it could do. This theory gained traction when an unmarked hab block was discovered in a supposedly depopulated zone. Perfect condition, lights functioning, air filtered, all systems nominal. Yet no one lived there. No signs of habitation. Every room, every hallway was a replica, identical to others across the hive, but wrong. Too clean, too quiet, like a memory reconstructed without understanding. The Mechanicus declared it a glitch in construction protocols. The Inquisition sealed it without comment. Others point to the phenomenon of biofeedback architecture. Zones where the hive appears to respond to emotional stimuli. Rooms that shrink when fear is high. Floors that become slick when aggression rises. Walls that bleed when psionic energy spikes. Some psychers report the hive reacting to their presence, amplifying their powers, distorting their perceptions, as if feeding on their minds, or letting them taste its own. But hunger implies desire, and if Tertium hungers, what does it crave? Emotion? Worship? Perhaps it feeds on death. Every corpse fuels its memory, every conflict strengthens its logic. Perhaps it was never meant to be this way. Perhaps the ancient designs, those buried STCs or pre-imperial cores, were corrupted over time, not by chaos, but by exposure to humanity, our fear, our violence, our prayers. Maybe we made it this way. Maybe our need for the hive to care, to protect, to punish made it awaken. The cults that worship the hive directly call themselves the Synapse Choir. They claim the hive speaks in static, dreams in steam. Their rituals involve walking blindfolded into the deep, trusting the hive to lead them. Some return with knowledge they should not possess, security codes, inquisitorial clearance rights, future deployment schedules. Others return broken, their voices replaced by vent hiss and cogwheel clicks. Still others never return at all. One such cultist, captured and interrogated, said something that still echoes in the records of the Ordo Hereticus. The hive is the Emperor's child, forgotten, abandoned, but it remembers the womb, and it will grow teeth. If this is true, if the hive is not merely alive but becoming something, what happens when it fully awakens? Does it speak through our machines? Guide our bullets? Reject our faith? Will it be a god of metal and regret, or a child lashing out in pain, reshaping the hive to suit its own image? The evidence is circumstantial, the implications terrifying. And yet, more and more, operatives are reporting impossible coincidences. Missions that go wrong in ways that feel orchestrated, miraculous survivals that cannot be explained, data slates that rewrite themselves, maps that update before scouts return. We treat the hive as a machine, as a structure. But what if it is a host? What if it contains something not born but cultivated? Not worshipped, but feared? What if the true architect of Tertium isn't human at all, but tertium itself? And what if it's no longer content to be just a city? The Imperium is built on denial, not merely of pleasure or freedom, but of knowledge, of truth, of the past. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the bureaucratic and dogmatic approach to the Hive's unmapped depths. The greatest defense the Imperium has against the unknown is not armor or firepower. It is censorship. And beneath that, fear. A fear so old and institutionalized that it no longer feels like panic. It feels like policy. When operatives are deployed into zones deemed unstable, their briefings are redacted. When cartographic data contradicts observed terrain, the data is deleted. When anomalies are reported, the reports are sealed, refiled, buried in stacks of meaningless numbers until they become irrelevant. This is not accidental. It is an engineered ignorance. Because in the eyes of the High Lords, what cannot be contained must be forgotten. Fear governs the documentation process. Tech priests who record too much are reassigned or silenced. Inquisitors who question official doctrine are branded radicals. Even among the Astra Militarum, it is considered heretical to compare maps from different campaigns too closely. Why? Because the inconsistencies mount. Because the Hive is not just full of secrets, it is made of them. Every layer of tertium conceals another truth, and truth, to the Imperium, is poison. In this ecosystem of suppression, survival itself becomes a kind of treason. To return from a forbidden sector with unexplainable knowledge is to invite execution. Witnesses are memory wiped. Survivors are disbelieved. Even cogitators are scrubbed and reset. The data is too dangerous. The very act of acknowledging the unseen is treated as complicity. In this way, fear becomes recursive. It feeds itself, grows stronger with each censored report, each sealed vault, each silenced voice. The ecclesiarchy plays its part. Sermons speak not of exploration, but of confinement. The walls are holy, the limits divine. To seek what lies beyond is to insult the emperor. Pilgrims are taught that knowledge is temptation, that only the God-emperor may know the totality of his creation. All else is arrogance. This spiritual framing ensures that even the curious condemn themselves. Doubt becomes sin. Inquiry becomes rebellion. And so, the truth is protected not by secrecy alone, but by faith weaponized into a cage. But faith does not silence all. There are rogue archivists, excommunicated scholars, even sympathetic inquisitors who believe the truth must be known. They work in silence, building forbidden databases, copying maps by hand, stitching together patterns from the fragments that survive official deletion. Some vanish without a trace. Others become outlaws. A rare few survive long enough to pass their data to the next generation. This is not a rebellion. It is a quiet war for remembrance. The price of this censorship is steep. When a threat emerges from a forgotten sector, be it a plague, a cult, a daemon, response is slow. Intel is unreliable. Units are deployed blind. Operatives die not because they are ill-equipped, but because they are uninformed. The Imperium's refusal to acknowledge its own darkness makes it vulnerable to it. Every sealed vault becomes a time bomb. Every redacted report becomes a future casualty list. This suppression is not without irony. For in trying to prevent panic, the Imperium manufactures greater chaos. It hides threats until they are unmanageable. It suppresses warnings until only exterminate seems a viable option. Entire sectors have been lost to avoid the embarrassment of admitting danger. Entire populations sacrificed on the altar of silence. Some speculate that even the Inquisition doesn't know the full truth. That higher powers, perhaps even within the Golden Throne's inner sanctum, have decreed that certain knowledge be suppressed at all costs. That the warp isn't the only realm that drives men mad. That perhaps tertium, in its depths, conceals something older than chaos, something more human, something more terrifying. And that fear, not ignorance, is the true law of the Imperium. Yet despite it all, the Hive remembers. Even if the records are purged, even if the maps are burned, the walls remain, the echoes remain, and the operatives who vanish into silence, they too are remembered. Not by name, not by rank, but by their absence, by the void they leave behind. The Imperium may fear the truth, but tertium does not. It absorbs it, lives it, becomes it. And one day, when the censorship fails, when the fear no longer outweighs the need to understand, what truths will emerge from the dark, and who will be left to witness them? Every mission in tertium begins the same way. A briefing, a drop, a prayer. But what we face in the Hive is not merely heresy, not simply disease or disorder. It is the unknown, clawing at the seams of certainty. We fight, yes, we purge, we burn. Yet beneath all that violence lies something deeper. An encounter with mystery, with a reality bigger than any sanctioned doctrine or codex. And in that encounter, something stirs in us. Something dangerous, something vital, a need to know. Because Tertium is more than a war zone. It is a riddle carved in rust and bone. A city with secrets older than the Imperium, deeper than the warp, louder than any gunfire. And those secrets matter, not just to the Inquisition, not just to the Mechanicus, but to us. The operatives. The nameless, the replaceable, the brave. Because every time we step off the dropship into smoke and steel, we aren't just fighting for survival. We're pressing against the veil. There are things we've seen that don't fit the official narrative. Doors that shouldn't be there, corpses that vanish, words etched into walls before we arrived. And we learned slowly, painfully, that we are part of something much larger than a mission. We are witnesses to a living mystery. We walk maps that lie. We follow orders written by people who are afraid to ask why. And still, we move forward. Not because we are fearless, but because we are hungry for truth. Darktide is a game about cleansing filth, about holding the line. But look closer, and you'll see it's also about decay, of knowledge, of meaning, of identity. It's about what happens when a city forgets itself, and when the ones sent to save it begin to remember. Each echo in the corridors, each malfunctioning machine, each whisper through a sealed door, these are invitations. Not to flee, but to dig deeper. This is what lies beyond the maps. Not just danger, not just monsters, but questions. And perhaps that is the greatest threat to the Imperium of Man. Not that its soldiers will fall, but that they will start to ask. Who built these chambers? What were they for? Why were they sealed? And most damning of all, what if the Emperor doesn't want us to know? We may never have answers. The tides of data, of blood, of heresy, they rise and crash without mercy. But within them there are patterns, hints, truths not yet understood. And by stepping into the unknown, we shape it. By refusing to turn away, we give it form. The Hive cannot remain silent forever. Its secrets are not dead, they are dreaming. And so we keep fighting, not just for duty, not just for glory, but to pull one more truth from the dark, to drag one more hidden horror into the light, to etch one more impossible corridor onto the map and say, I was here, I saw, I endured. Something is changing in Tertium. It's subtle, too subtle for most to notice. But those who've walked its darkest arteries, who've felt the air shift when no vents open, who've heard Vox channels bleed into dreams, they know. The Hive is stirring, not just in metaphor, not just in horror, but in pressure. Suppressed truths are building. Sealed doors strain against their hinges. Forbidden knowledge hums at the edges of sanctioned thought. The silence is beginning to crack. The fractures appear first in data. Cartographs once thought purged begin to reappear, reconstructed from memory, scrawled in dirt and oil on Hive walls by madmen and children. Cogitator logs long since erased start to regenerate themselves, fragments of corrupted entries that link to files no longer in the system. Machine spirits display behaviors outside known parameters, responding to queries with cryptic affirmations or warnings not in their programming. Even the ecclesiarchy's sacred tabulae begin to misprint sermons, injecting lines that do not exist in any recorded litanies of faith. The Hive is trying to speak. Then come the dreamers. Psychers, unsanctioned and otherwise, whose minds were once closed like armored vaults, now find themselves pierced by visions they cannot block. Nightmares not of demons or flame, but of architecture, of impossible rooms, of geometries that move. They speak of spiral staircases that lead inward to nothing, of data shrines lined with bone, of cathedrals made of language and memory. Their dreams form maps, unreadable, maddening, but undeniably maps, as if the Hive itself is offering a path, if only someone could understand it. The Ordo has noticed. The Inquisition's presence in Tertium has shifted from passive oversight to active containment. Kill teams have been observed not just purging heretics, but hunting knowledge itself, confiscating pict feeds, scrubbing Vox archives, executing scribes for drawing incorrectly remembered architectural features. They move with haste, not precision. Like people trying to plug leaks in a dam they know is already fractured. But not everyone serves suppression. Within the ranks of the Guard, the Mechanicus, even the Fraterus militia, cells are forming. Groups united not by heresy, but by curiosity. Whisper networks sharing forbidden data, matching anomalies across deployments, comparing dreams. They call themselves the Maples, and they believe the Hive wants to be seen. Their theory is simple but terrifying. Tertium has been trying to reveal itself for centuries, but the Imperium, in its fear, has fought to blind itself. Now the Hive is pushing back, increasing the frequency of anomalies, allowing the brave and the broken to glimpse pieces of its inner design. Not to destroy them, but to offer a choice, silence or revelation. Even loyal acolytes feel it, a deep unease, a pressure behind the eyes when they walk unsanctioned routes, data slates that feel heavier, vox lines that hum with something like anticipation. One veteran Arbites officer described it best. It's like the Hive is holding its breath, and it's waiting for us to decide if we deserve to hear what it says when it exhales. Some claim to have already heard it, a low-frequency tone, imperceptible to the untrained ear, that plays in certain sealed districts. A single note, always the same, detected independently in 4 sectors, recorded on 3 separate occasions, and matching no known Mechanicus protocol. The Maples believe it is a key, that when enough hear it, truly hear it, something will change. That access will be granted, not by code or clearance, but by understanding. This revelation terrifies the Imperium, because it is not being driven by heretics nor rebels nor Xenos. It is coming from within, from those still loyal, still praying, still bleeding in the Emperor's name. If the Hive opens, it will not be to the enemy, but to its own. And if that happens, what becomes of censorship, of silence, of fear? There are reports, unconfirmed, disavowed, of a sector that unlocked itself. No hacking, no override, just opened, lights activated, air flowed, and inside, nothing, no enemies, no traps. Just a massive chamber lined with mirrors, each reflecting not the viewer but the Hive. Different versions, different shapes, different histories. Some showed the Hive on fire, others whole. Others still, empty, lifeless, a husk, a vision of possibilities, a library of outcomes. What if the Hive is not a place but a question? And what if we're the answer? If you believe this is madness, that's fair. So does the Inquisition, so does the Church, so does half the Hive. But madness has always been the precursor to revelation, and revelation has always been the Emperor's most dangerous gift. This is the moment before the tide breaks, before the map becomes meaningless, before we are asked not just to fight for the Imperium, but to ask what it means. And whether what lies buried beneath Tertium is not an enemy, but the truth we were never meant to see. Because if the Hive is waking, and if its secrets are coming for us, we will have to choose silence or understanding, and neither path leads back. If this exploration stirred something in you, if you felt that pull toward the unseen, the unexplained, the forbidden, then join us. Subscribe to the channel. There are more maps to tear apart, more whispers to decode. More of the Hive waiting to be seen. Because the truth isn't a threat, it's a mission. And it begins in the dark.